I am a drug addict, now clean, and this is one of 3 or 4 close calls I've had in my prior days living in the streets. I was hanging outside of a Walmart in my city one evening, and it was probably around 10 p.m. Not having much to do or anywhere to go, I was as usual just killing time. This guy approached me, and we got to shooting the shit. He seemed like an okay guy, and he explained that he was just heading inside to boost a few things, that he knew a guy out in the suburbs that paid top dollar for merch. When you're on the streets, this is a quick way of scoring, trading stolen merchandise for either cash or drugs. I agreed to wait for him while he went inside, and then the plan was to hop on rapid transit to go meet this student score. He returned about a half an hour later, and we started heading to the subway, and we were chatting about what kind of stuff we both had to trade. I already had a few items that I had scored earlier, and I was kind of looking forward to getting top dollar for my product. As he had explained, this guy was quite generous. In retrospect, I should have caught this play from the beginning, as I am quite sharp usually, but being dope sick, I wasn't thinking very straight. All of a sudden, this girl shows up and starts walking beside us. She introduces herself to us and ends up tagging along. On the subway there, she's talking about Jesus and all these good things about her life. We got off at our stop and started walking to the merch dude's house. On the way there, it became very evident that these two knew each other. There was a bit of whispering going on, and what originally flagged my intel was when the Jesus talk stopped and the sinister prostitution story she had experienced, plus some other dark stories started and persisted. It started making me nervous. But we finally got to this guy's house, but none of the lights were on. There was obviously no one home, but this dude kept knocking on the door as if the guy was expecting him. At this point, I knew there was no merch guy, and this was just some random house. We left that property, and I swear to this day, the look on both of their faces screams darkness to me. We were walking up a hill, and he was telling me how that his friend wasn't home, so he had a plan B. I looked behind me as we were walking, and there was now another guy following us about 10 feet behind. As we crossed the next intersection, a guy traveling towards us from the adjoining sidewalk turned in front of us and was now walking about 10 feet in front of us. Now the guy and the girl are right beside me, wedged right up against me, and this disgusting girl is talking about human trafficking and what happens to people during ransom scams, and really starting to scare the shit out of me. So yeah, now alarm bells are going off full force, and I'm wondering what I did in this life to end up in a situation like this. I said, shit, I gotta tie my shoe, and I stopped. I looked down, then without looking up, I drove my foot right down to the guy's knee, which hyperextended, and I punched the girl in the throat as she fell back. The two guys in front were now a couple feet away, coming to grab me. I slipped out to the left and I sprinted across the street, all the way up to the next intersection. There was a bus coming from the opposite way. I turned left and sprinted to catch it where it was pulling over to a stop. I caught up to it and I got on. I glanced back, but there was no one behind me or chasing me. I was completely out of breath, and the bus driver just said, "Hey, calm down there, partner. There will be another bus in about 4 hours when the sun rises. No need to run that fast to catch this one." I gasped the words, "Thank you," and the bus pulled away. In about 5 minutes, I was back to the original subway station that we had gotten off at. I caught the last train back downtown, and I cried the whole way back. I'm a 39-year-old male, by the way. Unfortunately, scenarios like this are extremely common where I live, and most people aren't as lucky as me. Most people end up turning tricks or tied to a chair, tortured, and getting money extorted from their families. To that odd couple I decided to trust, and let's never meet. A few days ago, I decided to go to Walmart to pick up a few things. That day, I was wearing a bright dress with sunflowers printed on it. I wore my hair down, which is also a brighter blonde color. As I was shopping, I went down an aisle to grab mirin. As I walked down, I felt eyes on me. I stood in front of the shelves, stocked with different sauces and condiments, looking for the mirin, when a guy came so close to me that I had to look at him. The moment we locked eyes, he smiled and said, "Hi, how are you?" I instantly felt uneasy, so I just said nothing. I smiled at him and walked away. There's no particular reason this man made me feel uneasy. I suppose he looked fine. He looked like he was in his early to mid-30s, maybe a few inches taller than me, around 5'8", and had brown hair. His dirty orange cut-off shirt and brown boots made me think he was in construction, but who knows? All I know is that he was weird in a way that I can't put my finger on. After I walked away, I went to the complete opposite end of the store and I kept looking around. He was nowhere to be found for the next 20 minutes or so that I shopped, so I thought I was just overreacting. I started heading towards the checkout area, and once I got to the lines, I saw him standing right next to the refrigerators next to the checkout, staring at me. He had only one item in his hand, so after we made eye contact, he walked towards the self-checkout area. I did a 180 and then I headed for the longest line I could find, thinking I could wait him out. It took me about 20 minutes to get through the checkout, and I dragged my feet, walking out of the store, making sure the guy wasn't waiting for me. With him nowhere to be seen, I picked up the pace once I got outside. I started to think I was just being irrational. He wasn't unattractive, and he gave off no signs of actually being dangerous. I must be crazy, right? Walking towards my car, I saw a worker's truck waiting close to the exit start to drive around the parking lot once I stepped out of the store. I didn't think much of this truck at the time because I had the thought that the guy had left, and at that point I just wanted to get to my car because it was raining. I finished packing my trunk when the same truck started to pull through the spot diagonal of mine, slowly inching into the spot right next to my car, so that my driver's side was right next to the truck's driver's side. I heard the guy's voice say, "Excuse me," as I opened my car door. I quickly slid in, hoping I could just get away with him thinking I didn't hear him. I locked the door, turned the car on, and quickly turned it into reverse. I started pulling out, but before I could get far, the brown truck pulled forward and moved diagonally right behind my car so that I couldn't back up without hitting him entirely. I looked in front of me and realized with a car in front of me, there was no way I was going to just drive out of there with no issues. I turned my head and I saw the guy sitting in his truck with his window rolled down. I decided to roll my window down and asked, "What's up?" in a hostile tone. He began, "I just saw you in the store. You know, you are absolutely beautiful. Just had to tell you." "Oh, thank you," I said, praying he didn't get out of his vehicle. "I just couldn't let myself walk away without asking you for your number so that I can take you out," he said. I picked up my hand with my wedding ring and I told him I'm married. As he began to respond, I rolled up my window and stared at my steering wheel, waiting for him to move his truck. I couldn't stand to look in his direction because I felt his eyes on me. So after what seemed like the longest minute, I heard him finally move his truck. However, I peeled out of there in a heartbeat. The guy might have had good intentions. He might have been genuine, but I got a dark and heavy vibe that just didn't sit right with me. This happened when I was about 13 years old. I'm 21 now. It also took place at a Walmart in my small Ohio town and involved myself, female, and my friend Jess, whom was about 14. It was a day like any other. Must have been the weekend because I was staying with Jess at the time. Her grandma needed to go grocery shopping, so we decided to tag along since we didn't have much else to do. The trip there was uneventful and nothing happened when we first arrived. We all walked in together, and as her grandma fetched a shopping cart, we asked her if we could do our own thing. She said yes. So we set off to the opposite side of the store as the groceries. We turned down an aisle and started walking toward the back of the store, where they keep the electronics and video games. As we walked, we looked down the aisles, just casually checking everything out. To our right, down the aisles, a ways, was the toy section, and each time we looked to our right, we had a clear view of all the toys. Also, about 3 to 4 rows down, we look to the right and see a middle-aged man standing in the toy aisle, surrounded by 4 or 5 little kids. The man looks up at us at the same moment we look at him, and he smiles and waves his hand, as if to call us over. Jess and I look at one another, laugh, and keep walking. We honestly had no red flags going off because we thought he was waving one of his kids over, as they were running around the aisle. Continued walking to the back, chatting like we usually would, unaware of any danger. We get to the back and start looking at all the cool cell phones that we couldn't afford, and the video games and all that wonderful stuff. We headed over into the CD and DVD section, and we noticed a teenage boy, maybe 15 or 16, standing in the middle of the aisle. He looked at us for a second, and I could see the nervousness and fear all over his face, which made me feel weird because I noticed every sideways glance he shot us. Eventually, we grew bored, so we decided to head back toward the front of the store. I think maybe we were heading toward the clothes section. We round the corner, and it was either the first or second aisle to our left that we noticed a familiar figure approaching us. It was the man from that toy aisle, But now he was completely alone, and like the last time we spotted him, he smiled and waved us over. I take a quick glance around us, certain he was waving at someone behind us, but nobody was there. Just us, again, and Jess and I look at each other, laugh and walk on, making sure to move fast to lose this guy. We still weren't as alarmed as we should have been, but what are the odds that we run into that guy again? Sure, it was strange that he had in fact been waving us over to him, but hey, everything was chill. Need I mention that we were naive? I should mention something before going on. Jess and I did this thing back then. Whenever we went somewhere public, we'd pick whatever names we wanted, and that's what we called each other, just in case anything like this situation ever happened. My usual pick was Emily, and normally Jess was Roxy, but that day she chose Starletta. We get to the clothes section, talking about the guys we look around. Basically just window shopping, since we had $0 to our name. We were there for a good 10 minutes. Uneventful, I may add. We chatted and put that creepy guy out of our thoughts. I'm not sure where we went next. I just know somewhere at some point, we ran into that guy again. And again, he waved us over, but he seemed much more agitated. This time we didn't laugh. We turned right around and took the hell off. We finally realized that this was a dangerous situation and this guy had nasty intentions. It definitely wasn't funny anymore, and it wasn't a game. This was every person's nightmare. I'll be honest when I say I cracked for a minute. I was so terrified, but I knew I had to be tough and use my head. At this point, we decided to find Jess's grandma on the opposite side of the store. We chose to go to the front of the store, where most people and employees are, and make our way to the grocery section, where her grandma was. We get to the front, and we're walking toward the groceries, past checkout stations, and the jewelry section. Immediately noticed these two dudes, one wearing a hat, and the other with his hood up. I don't know what made me notice them. Call it intuition, but as soon as I noticed them, they were watching us, and they both immediately looked away when they met my gaze. In that moment, I knew they were watching us, for that guy. I watched as the one in the hat got on his phone and put his head down as he spoke silently. Jess and I searched the entire grocery section, which is literally half of the store, and no grandma. We can't find her anywhere. I'm aware some scary shit is happening and we can't find our guardian. Needless to say, we were pretty damn terrified. Unsure of what to do, we head back to ground zero, the other side of the store, passing the two dudes again, and the hat guy getting on his phone again. We thought maybe her grandma had gone to that side of the store to find us, so we were hoping to run into her. We go down a main aisle instead of the smaller ones, and we ended up running into a mutual friend, Kel, a female. It was nice finding a familiar face. We tell Kel about what was happening, and I mentioned the teenage boy that we'd seen earlier. Same as the two dudes, I just had a feeling the boy was in on it too. Kel decides to go confront the boy, to see if he would spit anything out. Jess and I stayed back, allowing her to approach him alone. After a couple of minutes of them talking, and him nervously looking around, eyes wildly flicking between us, her in the area, Kel walked back over and said he wouldn't say much. I guess she asked if he knew where his dad was, to which the boy said he wasn't sure. So basically, it was just a waste of time. We walked away, and I would say about 10 minutes passed by, when Kel inevitably had to leave. So we said our goodbyes, and once again, we were on our own. We head down an aisle, and see that guy again and run. We get to the main aisle of the store, head back toward the back of the store, and turn the corner, and here he comes. Closer than he's been all this time, and waves two fingers at us, very angrily saying, "Come here." Jess, bless her heart, was so terrified that all she could do was meekly whisper, "Hi." I looked at her and said, "Hi?" I said as I grabbed her shoulders and shoved her back the way we had been coming, and we both took off running. Jess kept running straight, and I took a quick right turn, thinking she'd follow me, but she didn't. It was about 30 seconds later that I realized she hadn't followed me. I panicked hard, so I whipped around and ran back, more concerned about my friend than running into that man. I went to the direction she had gone, and a few aisles down, I found her. She was standing dead still a few feet ahead, and a few feet ahead of her, moving quickly, was the man. He'd be on her in mere seconds, and in that moment, I couldn't remember the damn name she picked. Don't ask me why our aliases didn't come to mind in such a dire moment, but it only lasted a second. As soon as that thought came, I shouted, "Roxy!" She whipped right around and ran to me. I grabbed her arm and ran as fast and as far as our legs would carry us. We stayed near the center of the store, praying he didn't have any spies nearby. The fear at this point was overwhelming. I'm really shocked that neither of us had pissed ourselves. Especially Jess. She came so close to being close to him. God only knows what that psycho had planned for us. All we knew was that he really wanted us. I just remember being so angry that we couldn't find her grandma. We made way back to the grocery section again, and no grandma. We were desperate at this point. This chase was getting so tiring, and we were feeling hopeless. We ran into the asshole again and took off running down different aisles. We were stopped by a worker who was scolding us for running, cutting us off every time we tried to plead for help. Jess yells, "Shut up," and as the woman prepares to defend herself, I say, "There's a man following us and we can't find our grandma." This finally got her attention. Luckily, another employee, retired cop, overheard and stayed by our side the rest of this ordeal. This lady went off to look for the guy, and the cop dude proceeded to call Jess's grandma over the intercom. We waited about 5 to 10 minutes before walking to the front of the store, with the lady joining us as we all made our way to the grocery section, passing the two dudes. Hat guy was getting on his phone again, wide-eyed. We still couldn't find grandma, so we were walking back to the counter that they called her to, when here comes the guy. Shopping cart, kids and all. We hadn't seen those kids once since we first saw that guy. We immediately pointed him out, and the cop takes us around the corner as the lady approaches the man to confront him. A few minutes passes by, and the lady walks back to us, and the man walks away, him taking one last look, or glare at us. She said he denied following us, and said he was shopping with his kids the whole time. We eventually find grandma, and it turns out she wasn't even in the damn store. She finished her shopping and went out to the car. We ended up leaving, thank God, not with that guy. I realize now just how stupid we were and terrifying this actually was. The scariest part is how orchestrated it all was. People looking out for him on all sides of the store. Wherever we went, he'd be there. And I always wonder, were those kids really his, or were they just not lucky enough to get away? To start this story off, I'm 15 years old, but I look a tad bit older. Still, I couldn't be mistaken for more than 17. I'm 5'2" and also 110 pounds. Anyways, the other day I was walking around Walmart looking for some new room decor and buying hair dye. I went to the hair dye aisle by myself and ran into an older man. He told me he was looking for hair dye for his granddaughter but couldn't find the color she wanted because he didn't have his reading glasses on. He told me the color and I found it for him, and he asked a few other questions like how long his granddaughter's hair was and how dark it was, to make sure that he got the right amount of dye, and to tell him if he needed bleach or not, since the dye was a bright Barbie pink. After making sure he had everything he would need, he thanked me and walked over to the next aisle. I got my dye and I walked off to go look at more room decor. When I was in the aisle with the bedding sets, I noticed the man was there as well. I just assumed that maybe his granddaughter's birthday was coming up or something, so he was just getting stuff for her, since I was in the girls' bedding aisle. I grabbed the bedding set I wanted and I went to look at the fake plants. When I got to the aisle, he was there too. I turned to smile at him and I realized that he no longer had the hair dye or any bedding. That's when I started to panic. My phone had died at some point because it was dead when I got it out of my pocket to call my brother. At this point, I remembered that my mom told me if I ever felt like I was in danger at Walmart, to go over to the phone cases since they're locked in a case. There's always a worker there to help. When I got to the phone cases, I asked for assistance getting a case from the locked box. When the worker came over to help, I explained my situation and pointed out the man to him. Me and both the worker realized at this point that this man was sitting down and seemed to be recording or taking pictures of me. He told me to give him a second before handing me a random case from the box and going into the back room. The other worker pretended like he was having trouble ringing me up. Then I noticed the worker that had gotten me the case come out of the back room in his everyday clothes before circling around the aisles and coming up to me. He very loudly asked where I had been. I told him that I was just getting a new case, but there seems to be a problem getting it rung up. He pretended to argue with me before grabbing the case, handing it to the cashier, and telling him that we wouldn't be buying the case and that we were leaving now. The worker walked with me all the way back to the self-checkout and waited with me until my brother got up there with his stuff. I don't know what that man's intentions were, but I know they weren't good. So to the Walmart workers who helped me out of what could have been a very dangerous situation, thank you. At first I wasn't going to share this story, but now I'm more over the situation. Before we start, judge me all you want, but I know I can be a bit stupid. It's only because I don't like to force myself to live on edge because of the sick people in this world. I live my life as freely and fearlessly as I possibly can. At the time of the story, I was 23. My birthday just passed the 29th of November, making me 24 now. I'm only 5'2" and maybe 170 pounds. I'm strong enough to help move furniture, but not strong enough to defend myself the way I would like. You would think as someone who survived an attempted sexual assault, I would have learned some self-defense, but I've lost a lot of motivation and self-worth since. The abusive relationship really made it worse, but that's besides the point. So to start, I won't get into major details, but I had just moved back to Jackson, Tennessee, from Miami, Florida, because I had just gotten out of an extremely physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive relationship that lasted 3 years. Sometime in June, my current boyfriend and I had been doing trips pretty much every weekend. We would always visit a new hiking and camp waterfall area. Although there isn't a nightlife, Tennessee is amazingly beautiful. We went to this place called Narrows of Harpeth. This was one of the underwhelming places that we've been, but still relaxing. After we found a cool place to sit and swim, after hiking for 2 hours, a few shots and 1 blunt later, it was time to make the hour trip back to Jackson. I put my shoes on and I slipped my dress back on, which is a little bit above knee length. Like if I bend too far forward, my bum would be on display. I own my body and my sexuality, so showing some skin never really bothers me. And I don't really think about it because I just expect people to respect me as I respect them, and the way they dress. Anyways, on the way back to the car, I, being the tipsy dumbass I am, managed to trip and fall and scrape my leg pretty bad. It's actually scarred now. Anyways, I tell my boyfriend that we need to go to Walmart once back in Jackson so I could thoroughly clean my wound with hydrogen peroxide and Neosporin. And my boyfriend says okay. About an hour later, we're at Walmart. Mind you, it's only about 9 p.m., going on 10 p.m. Not late by any means. We get what I needed, but because I am a little tipsy and pretty high from the blunt that I finished in the car ride home, I get distracted really easily, and I remembered that my boyfriend got me the wrong size case for my iPhone 11 Pro. He got the Max instead of just the Pro. I wanted an idea of what I could trade it for when he wanted to look at some of the games as well as a gaming PC for me. So I am happily tipsy and excited to find a new case, which, if you have ever been to Walmart for the cases, they are never in order and often causes you to bend down to look at things. But there was a man looking at the cases and I just said, "Excuse me, sorry. Can I look at those cases you're standing in front of?" He just looked at me with a blank yet dirty look and nodded and stepped over. As I am happily looking through the shelf, about 5 minutes in, and this lady and what I assume are her 2 children approach me. Mind you, we are in the middle of a pandemic and I am thrown off by how close she is to me, especially with her baby that looks no older than 9 months. I step back and she grabs my arm and says, "Oh my god, wow, I haven't seen you in forever. Look at that hair, wow." Her grip tightens. At this point, my heart is racing and my face gets so hot and I'm even visibly scared. That's when my boyfriend says, "Everything okay, babe?" He looks at me equally concerned. I'm thinking to myself, does this lady know my mom? And who is she? Is she an old family friend that I don't remember? Mind you, I'm originally from Ohio. We do have family here, but I don't know any of my family that lives in Tennessee. Also, my mom loves to brag about her kids, so I'm trying to shake this weird feeling. But her daughter keeps looking behind me, so I go to turn around, and she goes, "No, don't turn around. Walk with me, please. Trust me." I don't know why, but I felt like she was being genuine, and I just followed her. We step over to the side by the baby clothes, which is still in front of the electronics, and she says, "I'm so sorry to scare you, but there are 3 men surrounding you. They went by the laptops, talked, and then I noticed the guy taking photos and videos of you while you were bent over looking at the cases. The other man was the tall guy next to you, and I didn't know where the 3rd man went. All I can remember is this high-pitched ringing in my ears, and my stomach flipped, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I never knew what people meant when they say everything slowed down, but in that moment, everything moved in slow motion, and I was freaked out to the point that I have no clue what she said after. It was as if I blacked out for a moment, and then quickly came to realization that The family and my boyfriend were looking at me visibly panicked. I turned around and there he was. He was much shorter than me, maybe about 5'1", but he was very much built. Also looked to be about 40. The other man was maybe in his 40s and was 5'11"-ish. I'll never forget the dead blank rage in that man's eyes. Like his first meal in 5 days had been stolen from him and he was ready to kill in order to have it back. That's when I saw the taller man walk over to the short man and they said something and then both looked at me. Then looked back at each other and said something else and started to walk slowly towards us. At that point, we all turned and headed for the registers, and that's when I thanked my lucky stars, because there were about 3 cops at the front of the store. By the time I rudely pushed past people to get to the self-checkout, with tears in my eyes, and frantically repeating "excuse me" to anyone who got in front of me, I looked back and saw them just standing there, but with the third guy this time. My heart sank, and I wanted to pass out at that moment. I guess it looked like I was going up to the cops because they hightailed it once they saw me get close to them. Me being high as shit and being a black woman, I wasn't going to chance the cops turning this around on me because I was simply stoned and tipsy. My only thought was get to the car, get to the gun, don't stop, run. My boyfriend said he could barely keep up with me, and at one point, I had grabbed his hand so tight he had to force the grip off because it felt like I was going to crush his hands. Before anyone bashes my boyfriend, I don't expect a man to be my savior. Also, he isn't the angry, confrontational type. He is very calm and level-headed. He wouldn't even hurt a fly unless I asked him to get rid of it for whatever reason. I just knew I was the target and I am putting him at risk. I knew they could easily jump him and one of them could overpower me after taking him out. I probably looked crazy, half walking and running past everyone, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to become another missing sister. We made it to the car safely and peeled out of there. I've never seen him drive so fast, as he is beyond careful and would never speed. We sat at a Sonic for about an hour to make sure we weren't being followed, and we recounted everything that happened. I just couldn't believe we were both too tipsy to notice it had become prey in somewhere as simple as Walmart. I've never felt so stupid and irresponsible in my life. I never want to experience that fear and panic in my life again. I didn't even get the chance to thank the lady who pretty much saved us. Sometimes we talk about it. What if the lady didn't see what that guy was doing? Even if we caught on, there were 3, and we only saw 2 at first. That same night, I had a nightmare that the men attacked us in the parking lot. And the creepiest part of the dream was that the third man shoved me in the trunk, and as I went to look at his face, all I could see was a featureless face. I woke up in tears that night, realizing I didn't get a clear look at the third guy. It took me nearly a month to enter a Walmart again. Since I have moved states and have only been to Walmart once since moving here. So to the creepy men that stalked me, upskirted me, and basically followed me even when they knew I was around other people, I genuinely hope we never meet again, because the gun I carry on my person now has 3 beautiful hollows that would enjoy meeting you all. A couple of years ago, I worked at this 24-hour diner. Sometimes I worked the night shift. One day I was at Walmart after an afternoon shift that I worked, in my really painfully recognizable uniform. The guy in front of me had these crazy eyes and he was taking his sweet time bagging up his groceries, and he said hi. So I just said hi back. He was like, "Oh, you work at blank diner?" And I was like, "Yeah." He left the store and I bagged my groceries and walked out a couple minutes later. Well, that guy was outside and saw me get in my car. He didn't follow me though, or so I thought, and that was that. So fast forward 2 weeks, I'm working a night shift and it's 2 a.m. I was sitting outside smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. This white van pulls up and guess who hops out? He was like, "Hey girl, I've been looking for you. You remember me, don't you?" His eyes were bugging out of his head and he had a few buddies in his van. I stuck the phone in my pocket and he grabbed my wrist and started pulling me to the van and says, "Oh, come hang out with us." And I was just like, "No, dude." I yanked away and started backing towards the door and he kept asking if he could at least get my number. I just ran inside to the back and told my almost 7-foot tall coworker, who I got along with really well, and I'm still 99% sure he has at least done some prison time. But they drove off. 2 nights later, one of the windows were shot out with a BB gun during a night shift that I luckily wasn't working. But my coworker said it was a bunch of dudes who drove by in a weird white van.